Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF with Michael Popok and Melba Pearson. We're going to talk with a couple of amazing guests about a development that just happened related to a grievance filed, a bar grievance filed against Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States. I can only think of about a dozen or so things that grievance could have been based on. Violation of the Department of Justice guidelines, being a political hack instead of using proper prosecutorial discretion, using proper ethics. She's already, her department overall has already been chastised time and time again in federal courts for doing things like not being candid with the tribunal, lying to judges, firing lawyers who told the truth to judges and are no longer with the Department of Justice because that's not part of their policy. And a group of about 70 different leading people in our field, in Melba and my field, ethicists, law professors, lawyers, former justices of the Florida Supreme Court, former judges, and others got together, put together what I think is an airtight grievance, and something happened at the Florida bar, of which Melba and I are a member, that wasn't what we expected. Let's bring in our guests. We have Barbara Jaffe, retired judge from the New York Supreme Court, and we've got Jamie Conrad, who works with a group called Lawyers Defending American Democracy, was one of the architects for the grievance. Barbara also worked on it and was one of the signatories. And let's bring everybody in and let's start talking about what happened. Jamie, since you put the thing together, why don't you talk about what was the rationale behind it? How is it framed? What was your argument about why rules of professional responsibility in Florida have been violated by Pam Bondi? And then we can take it with the rest of our team.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much. What several of us had noted was that the Attorney General on her first day issued this memorandum on zealous advocacy on behalf of the United States. And that sort of got a few people's attention because for two reasons, but related ones. She said, well, the President of the United States determines the interests of the United States, but she also described the lawyers of the Justice Department as the President's lawyers, which they're not. They are the United States' lawyers. So there was some interest in, gosh, how is this going to play out within the Justice Department? And very quickly, it emerged that what Attorney General Bondi means by zealous advocacy is that she expects lawyers for the Department of Justice to violate their own ethics obligations whenever that suits the interests of President Trump. And we cited three examples in excruciating detail, including the example you bring up of the lawyer who was fired for telling the truth in federal district court in Maryland, and then two other examples I can go into. And so we explained kind of the common themes to those examples and why that indicated ethics violations by the Attorney General.
And what in particular, I mean, just to bring everybody sort of into our world for a moment, in a teachable moment, every state has a rules of professional responsibility or conduct. Most of them modeled after some model rules with some changes. We, the lawyers on this roundtable, all swore allegiance to it and an oath to it, to uphold it and to practice pursuant to it. That's what makes us a profession, a self-policing profession, right? I mean, there's the unitary bar states like Florida, where there is a thing called they love to capitalize that, the Florida bar. And then there's places like New York, where I also practice along with Barbara, where divisions or departments of the court system, the appellate court of which you were sworn, regulate your conduct, but using the same rules. What were the rules that you outlined or that was outlined in the grievance that you believe have been violated by Pam Bondi?
Mm-hmm. There are really three. The first of them, and the numbers kind of are the same from state to state. One is called 8.4A, and that prohibits a lawyer from trying to induce somebody else to violate the ethics rules, which she did kind of consistently in these three examples. The second one it's 5.1, and that's sort of a supervisory thing. The general notion there is that if you're in charge of a legal department at a company or a firm or a government agency, you need to have some kind of system to make sure that the people you supervise comply with ethics rules. And we said that she essentially turned that on its head and tried to make sure that her employees didn't comply with ethics rules whenever it got in the way of what she wanted. And then the third one is kind of a catch-all, 8.4a, which is basically interfering with threatening the administration of justice. And that's kind of the broad notion that lawyers are meant to uphold the rule of law and the justice system and not undermine it.
So Melba, from your vantage point of being both an American Civil Liberties Union lawyer, and weren't you a prosecutor?
Yes, former prosecutor and former ACLU affiliate.
Federal prosecutor.
State.
Oh, you're a state. Okay. But even as a state prosecutor,
yeah.
Did you think that you were not subject as a lawyer to that you left them, you abandoned them at the door of your office when you became a prosecutor?
Absolutely not. And that was one of the things that was very important to me in selecting what office I was going to work with, because I never wanted to be in a situation where I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. And I was compromising not only my personal ethics, but the ethics that have been set forth to the Florida bar. I raised my right hand. I swore an oath. I took that seriously. So I never wanted to be in a situation where I was forced to move forward with a case where I felt I had insufficient evidence.
Maybe. Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, or that I knew the police did something that was inappropriate and just cover it up and keep moving anyway. That's
suborn perjury while you're at it.
Exactly.
Well, did I fall asleep in the Florida Bar Review course on ethics when they told me that if I became a federal prosecutor or federal officer, that I could therefore abandon the rules of professional responsibility? Where was that in the course?
Yeah, like, hold on, let me look. Yeah, no, nowhere.
Right.
And again, it's just so tragic because prosecutors, especially prosecutors, have a higher burden. Now, yes, all lawyers have to follow the ethical rules, but a prosecutor holds someone's life, literally life, in their hands. You can determine whether or not someone goes to prison for life. You can determine whether or not someone faces the death penalty and gets put to death. You have a higher burden, and you have to make sure that you do everything by the book correctly. And again, if you don't have a case, you have no business bringing that in court.
So
and that's what happened here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Let's take it from a judge's perspective, because we have Judge Barbara Jaffe here. So Judge, a couple of things. Are you aware of this doctrine that the Florida Bar, I don't want to leave people on pins and needles here. Why don't you talk about what the Florida Bar did?
Well, they just said, we're not going to exercise our authority over Ms. Bondi because she's a federal officer, and we don't want to encroach on the feds doing what she's got to do, which is very disingenuous because there's no authority for that. And yet,
is she practicing law without a license then? I mean, I don't understand. She gets to go to court and argue as a member of the bar, but she's not regulated by the bar?
So it seems. I mean, your audience should also know that every law student has to take a course on ethics. Ethics is a real cornerstone of legal training. But in Florida, it seems like it's the Wild West. I happen to see that Governor Scott had actually removed a prosecutor, the chief prosecutor, who was refused to impose the death penalty in several cases. Yep. And on the first case, he removed her from that case, and then he removed her from many cases, blanket removal, simply because she made it known that she would not do a capital prosecution.
DeSantis did the same thing.
Which was which was within her discretion. Yeah. So your audience should understand that when you said self-regulating, it really is self-regulating, and that's the honor code that we all are familiar with. Yes, there are disciplinary committees, and somebody is going to file a complaint like Jamie did in his wonderful organizations who filed this complaint.
Well, let's do it this way. If a state or federal prosecutor had come into your courtroom and you had found through fact finding that they had lied to the tribunal, right? They had, forget candid, they lied to the tribunal. Would you refer them over to a bar grievance committee?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And I've done it.
Right. There you go. And you've done. And has that bar grievance committee turned around and said, sorry, they're feds. They don't have to comply with ethics.
Well, it wasn't a fed.
Right. But, yeah.
If it had been, in New York, that would not have happened.
Right. And that's the problem, that it's jurisdiction by jurisdiction. It's like Texas circling the wagons around, who was the one that wanted to release the Kraken? Sidney Powell. And not disbarring her when she should have been disbarred. Yes. Whereas if you're in Wisconsin or Arizona or some other free-thinking state, your law license shouldn't depend on the lackeys that are put in place by the governor into those positions. I'm actually embarrassed for the Florida bar. I've been a proud member of it since '95. I'm really embarrassed by their reaction. Melba, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to want to jump in and say how Rudy Giuliani got disbarred for all of his foolishness, disbarred in both New York and in DC. So there is precedent for it. It's not like this can't be done. It's just Florida threw up their hands and was like, I don't want to do anything.
Jamie, how long? They didn't take much. They didn't take that long. How long was the grievance? How many pages was the grievance? And then how short was the Florida bar response, and how quickly was it given?
It's 23 pages, single spaced, not counting the 2 or 3 pages of signatures. Their dismissal, we filed on June 5. They came back basically the very next day with a 1-page form letter. This is the third complaint against Bondi that they've dismissed. That's about 100 words. But you mentioned it's sort of disingenuous. The thing that's so maddening about this is their sort of stated purposes. Well, we don't want to encroach on the freedom of the federal executive branch to do its thing, but the policy of the United States with respect to the coverage of Justice Department lawyers by state ethics rules is that they are covered. There's a law called the McDade Amendment that was passed in 1998 because at one point in that time, the Justice Department actually said that they weren't subject to ethics rules. And this had to do with lawyers contacting unrepresented parties, represented parties, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to contact their lawyer. And so Congress passed this McDade Amendment and said that government lawyers, and they specifically say that the Attorney General is one of these government lawyers, are supposed to be subject to state ethics rules, just like any other lawyer in that state.
So how did Florida get around that? All right. Are you going to do a supplement, a motion for rehearing?
This will be the basis for our next steps.
Is that normal for the Florida bar not to meet the arguments that you put forward? I mean, I find that very strange.
They have this thing. There's this sort of odd constitutional officer doctrine in Florida that apparently goes back to the 19th century, where some office that's created by the state constitution gets treated in a sort of kid glove way, and so for some period of time, although there's not actually a rule that says this, the state bar has refrained from reviewing the ethical behavior of people who have an office spelled out in the Florida Constitution. But it's never, to our knowledge, it's never been applied to somebody who has an office created under the federal Constitution, which you think, should sort of none of the state's business. They let the feds worry about that.
Melba, why don't you take it home here for the audience about what are the implications and ramifications of state bars refusing to admonish and investigate members of Donald Trump's inner circle when it comes to the legal process, the Department of Justice. His former criminal defense and impeachment lawyers are all his inner circle. All four. Emil Bove maybe or maybe not be on the third. In the meantime, he's the number 3 in the Department of Justice. Blanche, the number 2. Pam Bondi, the number 1. And John Sauer, the Solicitor General, all. We talked about them at length for years as Donald Trump's, criminal defense brain trust. And to imagine a world where they are untethered to ethics, potentially. I guess, take it from there. And also, what should federal judges do when federal prosecutors violate their oath, whether it's Pam Bondi or anybody else? What do they do? Do they look? There's grievance processes through the federal courts. Is that now where we need to take these matters?
Well, I think so. I think so. I mean, a couple things. So first off, one aspect that's very critical to any bar membership is what's called continuing legal education credits. So every year or every reporting cycle, you have to take classes to basically stay current. And one of those classes is ethics. So it's not like you took it in law school and you can forget about it and not worry about it. In order to keep your bar license, you're supposed to continue to take ethics classes. So again, the fact that they're not even tying this to what their day-to-day duties are, or even thinking about that, is just so problematic. But to have all of these attorneys completely untethered, I think what needs to happen, these judges need to start telling them to bring their toothbrush and hold them in contempt. When people start seeing themselves complain and have to sit in the box, and the box is usually where, for those who don't know, in the courtroom, there's an area where you have to sit when you're about to be taken into custody. So once you hit that box, you already know what time it is. You know that you're going to go into custody and have a bologna sandwich that's going to be stale on horrible Wonder Bread. Okay. Right. So, once I think that starts happening, people will have to start changing their tune, because now the AUSAs themselves are going to be like, I'm not going to jail for this. I got bills to pay. I got a family to support. This is not what I signed up for.
And judges are going to have to start growing a pair. Sorry, Judge Jaffe, are going to have to start growing a pair. You're retired. It's all right. On this issue, because we have an administration that indicted a state court judge, indicted a member of Congress, and today threatened to arrest and indict a sitting governor of the United States. So judges, I'm sorry, they're going to have to pull their weight. And when they get a guy like Drew Ensign lying to them about Armando Abrego Garcia in the courtroom, and about the planes, whether it's Judge Boasberg's courtroom or Judge Zinnis's courtroom, like Melba said, they better start bringing their toothbrushes. Or as I was taught when I did a fair amount of white-collar criminal defense in my career, just make sure at the end of your day, when your client goes through the metal door, you go through the wooden door. We got to send some of these people through the metal door.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is it possible to start an investigation against Pam Bondi and in service of this doctrine or this preference that you don't encroach? Do the investigation, just don't sanction until she's out of office. Has anybody ever raised an idea like that? Does that make sense? If you
certainly
want to
she'd lose that protection, right?
Yeah, I mean, but that's part of what they said. They said they can't investigate or prosecute. They said they can't do absolutely anything, which again, if it was one of us, we don't enjoy that same privilege.
Yeah. And I think, Jamie, I think this should be tested. I brought up with Barbara on a side text that Alina Habba should be next on the list, and New Jersey's bar should get a bar grievance. And I think they may take it more seriously. New York and New Jersey sort of take things more seriously, especially given Alina Habba doing the same thing. I mean, the tone is from the top. The chief law enforcement officer of America is Donald Trump, which is a chilling thought. And then right down from there, Pam Bondi, just a political hack doing his bidding. And there's no greater political hack than Alina Habba, who it's obvious that the entirety of the Department of Justice just uses the DOJ manual as a doorstop. It's just hold and open the door. They're not reading it. They're not applying it. They're not abiding by it. And then this is the struggle we'll leave this chat with. What are we to do to police our profession and to give confidence to our audience, to the civilians that are part of the public criminal justice system? How do we renew that confidence if we can't regulate the conduct and behavior of an out-of-control attorney general, short of putting them in jail? We have jailed attorney generals in the past. See the Nixon administration. So it does happen. But let's just leave it. I'll just go around the horn. What is the next step here, other than asking the Florida bar to reconsider? Is it trying to go after somebody like Alina Habba? Is it getting federal judges to make referrals to the federal side of this equation? What is it? Let's start with Judge Jaffe.
Well, if I were a betting gal, I would bet that New Jersey right now is enacting some kind of rule that would preclude Alina from being from filing a complaint against her. That's
you
what
think New Jersey is going to block it? The blue state of New Jersey? Why?
Well, is there anybody? I mean, is it totally blue, New Jersey?
Yeah.
Is there anybody? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So I'm from New Jersey.
Let's do it there. Let's go. Let's go.
That's what I'm saying. You got Murphy. You got the Attorney General. You've got the legislature. You just had Baraka, mayor of Newark, get arrested on phony charges, and him filing a lawsuit against Alina Habba. Now is the time. I'm surprised Baraka hasn't done it. Maybe he has.
So, Jamie, isn't this Eldad's next step?
Breaking news.
Right?
Well, Eldad, it's not a partisan organization. They're basically just focused on defending the rule of law and trying to flag people who are trampling it. But in answer to your question, we need to do whatever, wherever, whenever we can to buck up and support the bar associations and state bars that will do their jobs, and the judges that stick out their necks to call things the way they see them. Because the rule of law is the only thing at this point that distinguishes us from Hungary or Venezuela.
Yeah, agreed. That and the food. Melba, why don't you round it out as a Florida bar member? What do you think should happen next?
I think it needs to be a full court press. Every tool that we have in our toolbox, we need to use. So whether we're looking at judicial referrals, whether we're looking at filing bar complaints in other states, whether we're looking at voting, because remember, some judges are elected. So, it doesn't apply to federal judges, they were appointed, but state judges may have a role in some of this too. So, again, full court press, any and every tool we need to throw at it and not be afraid. But contempt, I think, is the big one. Start
Agreed.
putting people in the jail cell, we will see a whole different chain of events.
Quote of the show: "Bring your toothbrush. That'll change hearts and minds."
Absolutely.
I'm glad everybody got together. You're on a special edition of Legal AF with retired Judge Barbara Jaffe, with Jamie Conrad, with Melba Pearson, and of course with Michael Popok, talking about how we regulate and hold lawyers accountable who also happen to be federal officers like the Attorney General of the United States. Take a moment. You're here already. Take a moment. Hit the free subscribe button for Legal AF. Help us to continue to grow. We're trying to reach 700,000 subscribers before this month is over. We can only do it with your fervent support and make our join our movement and make your journey part of our own. So until my next report, along with Melba Pearson, this is Legal AF reporting. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.